Thanks, Boise. Yeah, I get to do the stuff out on the ground and implement all the research with Team Screen. It's a great opportunity to get up here and tell you all about it. So just really quickly though, I just want to give you a quick rundown on Pumps 101. This is an example of what we expect to see when we go to a screening site. Older infrastructure, this is what we call an axial flow pump. These have an electric motor or a diesel motor up the top, and that runs a drive shaft that runs down the centre of the pipe, and that's usually runs into a fishtail, and there's a turbine or an impeller in there that drives the process of pumping your water. And what I guess the solution that AWMA have come up with for our screening sites is to pull the old infrastructure out temporarily for the pump, clean the site up, put in new pilings and put a trough in that's manifolded to take the screen, and then they sit the pump back in that. So that then is a fish-friendly site, effectively. So yeah, I'll lead the team to implement this, and it's a big program. We've got several different areas that we're working on at the moment, but it doesn't come by chance. As a department, we've I think really invested heavily in screening now, and there's external support and assessment of our processes and our approaches by RM Consulting, and what that's told us is that research, this is the best example that they've seen of research informing on-ground work, and we should keep on going with what we're doing. We've got solid research outcomes, and that's been critical to implementation of our screening programs in New South Wales. And through our strategic plan, New South Wales Department of Primary Industries has put its money where its mouth is and is invested in the expertise. We know that screens work for fish. How do we ensure though that the process of putting a screen in the river isn't going to give the water users a headache? Because if we give them a headache, then screens aren't going to get adopted, we know that. So I'll just share some of my experiences and some of the lessons that we've learned through investing $40 million so far into screening through incentive-based programs that have helped deliver really good ecological outcomes and help water users install screens and create a community of champions through that we can drive broader adoption across the industry. It's all great in theory, but how do you do that when there's literally 4,500 pumps in New South Wales? I don't know if it's correlation or causation, Boise, but we've got a ramp up in the number of pumps going in. We could test causation next year if we get more presentations on screening. We'll see, mate. So it hasn't happened overnight. I remember Boise presenting, I think, 2012, but it might have even been 2010 at the Native Fish Forum in Canberra about the impacts of pumps on native fish. It wasn't until 2018 that we saw screening sites installed in Victoria, and it was 2 years after that, in 2020, that we saw investment in New South Wales at the Trangie-Nevertai irrigation scheme. Yeah, the hard work is paying off now. People from other states and even other countries are taking notice of the diffusion of innovation approach that we're now taking in screening in New South Wales. So from 2018 to 24, we've had, in New South Wales, we've progressed now to 36 sites that protect some 23,000 hectares of farmland, they provide clean water to that area, and we're protecting about 820,000 native fish annually. By the end of 26, we'll have 48 sites with screens on them and be over 1.7 million native fish per annum protected. We've had some big wins, and we're seeing lots of progress in screening, and I'll share with you again some of these key learnings and some of the challenges we faced. I think the most important thing so far for us has been communication being so critical. We're working to align screening approaches across jurisdictions in the Murray-Darling Basin through governance frameworks like the Interagency Working Group and the Ministerial Task Force for Fish Passage, as well as the Australian Fish Screening Advisory Panel. So we're building understanding and agreement on screening specifications in those areas, and some of those collaborations have now led to things like having a common standard for screens across Murray-Darling states, and we're having regular meetings with our internal and external stakeholders to keep everyone informed. So like Hutcho sharing some of that information earlier has been coming in, which is great. We now have several papers as well. Joey's just talked, Paddy's just talked as well, and that they are evaluating the screening specifications, and these are confirming the suitability for the screens that we're putting in to protect Australian native fish. Managing impacts and external influences. COVID lockdowns saw massive price increases, material shortages and specialist equipment wait lists, some of which we're still dealing with. 12-month wait for a hydraulic pump, I think, is pretty standard now at the moment. Flooding, we had 3 consecutive years of really high river levels and flooding in the Macquarie River, and that made it really difficult to get the job done in the time where you thought you were going to be able to do it. Also, manufacturing new technology and how you put that onto old infrastructure. It wasn't too uncommon to lift a pump up and find it really heavily degraded and not be able to put the screen on, and you have to change your site and pivot and move to different locations. There was even one location where we turned up and they pressure washed the bottom of the bell housing, and the bearing casing just fell apart. So we had to leave site and look for other places to go. Well done on AWMA for coming up with some of the innovative solutions to this. Yeah, it was great work and great to be able to keep on going with stuff like this. When it stops flooding, it doesn't necessarily stop raining. So we had to consider things like building in large amounts of contingency into our projects that allowed us to keep moving when the hurdles come up. Stuff like when it rains and you're working on a floodplain, we all know what black soils can be like when you get out there, and being able to put down some gravel for AWMA to keep on working is really important. Working on really steep riverbanks, getting the old pumps out and digging around, getting the old infrastructure out. It was not uncommon to get down there and find an old pump, find an old pilings that have driven in, and it can all get in the way of what you're doing. Old infrastructure needs to be modified or completely removed to make room for the troughs. And one of the things we need to understand is having those pumps there ready to screen is critical. So getting a better understanding and being able to ask the right questions of our landholders when we're first engaging with them about how long has it been since they've taken their pump out, when was the last time it was serviced, do they know what condition it was in, how often do they have to fix it up. Working with cranes at their engineering limit was pretty incredible experience. This is at Narromine Irrigation Scheme, just moving some things around on site to make room, but that's at full extension, 200 feet out from the start there. Divers, underwater welding and gouging of materials, getting those sites really cleaned up to make it work so you can fit the screen under the water. I think there was one site where they found an old engine block down there as well, trying to move stuff around. It's just one of those things, and rocks and bits and pieces. I didn't think when we were going to be doing screening, we'd need to put in a notice to airmen at an airport so that when they're approaching or departing, they didn't run into the crane. But we needed to let them know that we had a crane at site that was 60 odd metres up in the air. Pilings, the precision needed under the water and on the riverbank to get them in was really challenging when you're dealing with old infrastructure that can get in the way. Even things like learning that the vibration unit that runs the pilings in created enough friction driving it in around the collars for the trough that it generated enough heat that it melted the steel and welded it together. Some of those things about learning how to change your approach and deal with that sort of stuff. Working with power lines and having to isolate the power at site, taking power lines down so you can get the crane in, installing the screens themselves and the retrieval hydraulics, heaps of different stuff. So another one of the sites, how do you fit 3 screens on 3 pumps when they're really close together? The solution is from AWMA really cleverly here. You manifold those 3 pumps together and put 1 screen on. So the common theme along the whole way here has been that everyone involved in this is learning by doing. That's the only way we can do it at the moment. And everything that we've done so far, we're able to apply to our other sites in the Northern Basin Toolkit, for example. And it doesn't happen without a great team. This is it. Anthony, Boise, Marita and Tom, and in days gone by, Maddie and Sam, who's now back as in habitat and threatened species. It couldn't happen without any of these guys. Our key steps, is that we're identifying our suppliers, and they are quite limited. This is really specialist design and manufacturing that we're dealing with. So we went to Public Works and we did a preferred tender approach. We're finding our sites through that diffusion of innovation concepts, and we're installing at sites, doing all that hard work, and then we're working to commission them with our landholders and providing them ongoing support and troubleshooting and coming up with solutions there. Understanding our stakeholders through that motivations and abilities analysis, what makes them interested in it, how do they see it as an opportunity, or is it a cost to them to do it, and how does that modify their behaviour? We can get into some more of that later. The lessons learned, the diffusion of innovation approach really does attract the innovators of industry. They are enthusiastic to this, they're really resilient, and they're forgiving. Molehills stay as molehills, we don't end up with mountains. A great example of this is Shane at Trangie-Nevertai Irrigation Scheme. They supply over 30 farms with about 600 megalitres a day of water, and they've saved about $3,000 a month off their electricity bill. And the site, this is a really early site, and we're learning a lot from some of the stuff we've done there. We've changed our approach to getting out to site with our tenderers. So instead of having to take them all out to site, we can now go out with a drone, and we can get really high resolution, great imagery. We can get the contours, and we can provide measurements, all this sort of information that we can take back to the office and provide online, and then supply that information. And that's really good news for the tenderers. That helps them with their approach as well. Our next stage of implementation is that we are crossing the chasm from the early adopters and the innovators into the majority of water users who have been watching this with interest. We're showcasing outcomes and activating those screening champions to build approach and acceptance of the technology, and that builds towards a self-sustaining and long-term outcome, I think. Developing the screening strategy, and Tom's going to talk about that, to prioritise where we install our screens, and we're pushing showcasing into the Southern Basin at gravity-fed diversions. We're looking for opportunities there. So in conclusion, there's lots of work that happens behind the scenes to get a screen in. Our projects are proceeding really well. We're working towards about 1.7 million native fish per year. We're always going to have risks from the weather. Our manufacturers, working with them to innovate and find new ways and new solutions. But there's huge potential across New South Wales, and there's enough interest at the moment with our existing EOIs that with an additional 38 million of funding, we could see that number of fish saved per year to go up over 3 million. And yeah, really keen to see what we can do in our gravity-fed diversions in the Southern Basin. And with that, I'll wrap it up. Thank you.